the union chair, and I'll be chairing today's meeting. So just if there's anyone joining us who this might be their first UEC, so UEC is the decision-making body of Kent Union formed of your elected representatives. So your full-time officers, your part-time officers, and then your open elected members. So the meeting tonight should run until 8 o'clock or 7:30. However, the final cutoff will be 8 o'clock. So just to run through the agenda for tonight. So we've got some items for approval, which Josh will talk through in a minute, which will be an amendment to the union bylaws. Then we will pass over to our full-time officers for any updates they might have. Then we will look for any questions from either UEC members or anyone who might be listening in. We'll then have a discussion on academic freedom in higher education, which will be led by Pat. Then we will have a discussion on expanding and decolonizing the curriculum that's been put forward by the BAME network. And then finally, we'll have a discussion on student engagement with Kent Union to finish off with. So just as a brief reminder, so for UEC members, if you are wishing to vote tonight for the proposal when we get to it, we'll just ask you to raise your hands like we did last week. And then just for anyone who might be listening in, if you could just stay muted until you're called upon to speak, that'd be absolutely fantastic. And with that, I will pass over to Josh to propose the amendment, which is also seconded by Pat and Aldo. Josh.
Thank you. So it's a pretty simple amendment. So following on from last week, the whole purpose of these bylaw changes is to empower this place so that students are making the decisions. So this amendment tries to make the UEC more accessible to
Josh, I think you might have frozen there. Just for a sec. Do you just want to say what you were just saying? Sorry.
Brilliant. I'm going downstairs. Hello? Good. I'm now sitting on the router, so it shouldn't block. Okay. Very professional start. So I will begin from the beginning. Basically, going on from the previous proposals, this one tries to make the UEC accessible to students through making the language about it easily understandable. Currently, the UEC it doesn't. If you don't know what it means, it's not very accessible to someone who doesn't already know what it is. So by calling it a parliament, we're using language that already is known, and it explains what this place is and what plans we have or should have for it in the future. Obviously, building on the policy proposal last time, which was to give this place the power to propose policy. This is to try and make students the people that really drive the student experience. So this is just, even though it's a little thing of just changing a name, and it's, it doesn't change it, what the UEC is known as on the whole, by just changing it for communication and marketing purposes, it really does just solve all the issues of trying to understand what this place is to people who may not know. That's it.
Brilliant, thank you, Josh. And just for a point of information, if anyone's listening who may have not seen the amendment, it is available on the union website under the agenda for today's meeting. Pat or Aldo, did any of you want to add any comments supporting it at all?
None particularly from me. I think it's quite a self-explanatory amendment, and Josh done a good job of explaining it as well. I've just put the amendment
Fantastic.
in the chat as well, so anyone who needs to have a quick look at it can find it there. Although I see Vicky's just done the same, more similar.
Brilliant, thanks guys. Cool. If Aldo, you don't have any points, I'll just quickly check if there's anyone who's wishing to make a statement opposing the motion at all. If you just want to put your hand up if that's the case. Okay. Oh, yep. Selena, do you wish to make an opposition statement?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to highlight that the word parliament, I know it's just a name change, not really that serious, but it's not really an SU term. So I don't really get why it needs to be changed to parliament. Obviously, executive committee is what's being used cross-sector. And I did want to ask if any students were consulted about the name change prior, and how you came up with the name parliament, really. So yeah, that's what I wanted to oppose. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. So I'll just pass that back on to Josh to respond, but we'll treat that as the opposition statement. If anyone wants to add any points after Josh has responded, then we'll open up for a quick open debate. So Josh.
Okay, so I disagree with the beginning bit that it's not an SU term. It isn't an SU term here. There are other student unions which do have a parliament and use the same terminology. Second question. Oh, about did we ask students? I didn't go to students to ask about this. Part of the reason is because I'd say that to get engagement in the first place in a democratic structure, you first need to make it accessible, which is what this tries to do. So yeah, it's basically to get us to a point where we can rely on, like, this is obviously part of other proposals which are going to come forward to try and make our engagement at the level where we can ask students what they want in an effective way. That's it. Brilliant. I'm happy to answer again. That's
of course. Selena, did you want to respond to any of that at all?
No, not really. I just wanted to find out if it was any engagement with students prior, but you've answered my question, so thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much. I'll now open up the floor for any other points anyone wants to raise. Aisha.
Hi, so there are a number of universities that we've spoken to. Essex, for example, Doncaster, Bedford and Liverpool all have student union parliaments. And this is something that they found has made them go forward in making it more accessible. So using simpler language that's easier for people to understand and making it more encouraging for people to take part. And one of the reasons I feel like this would be really helpful is it encourages more people to become observers and then hopefully get involved after that. So I'm hoping that this name change will make people more interested in taking part and then in the future becoming network leaders.
Thank you, Aisha. Anyone else? Okay, if no one else wants to make any points, we'll move forward to a vote then. So just with last week, what we'll do is I'll first call on anyone who wants to vote in favour of the motion. So if when I say that, you can just raise your virtual hand, and then I'll do the same for the noes and any abstentions. So if I could just, Ramsey, did you want to make a point?
No.
Okay, no, that's fine. Thank you. Cool. So if you're not a UEC member, if I could just ask that you please keep your hand lowered for this part of it. So first off, for anyone in favour of the motion, please raise your virtual hand. And I'll just give Tom a moment just to count those up, but it's looking quite unanimous. Okay, thank you. If you could just lower those. And then just so we can make sure everyone's had a chance for their votes to be recorded, if we could have any no's, please. Pat and Charlene, did you want to lower your hands?
My bad, sorry.
That's right. Okay, right, I see 2 votes opposing. Thank you, Charlene and Ethan, can you lower your hands? And then did we have any abstentions at all? I think that was pretty much everyone. Sebastian, thank you. Cool, okey-dokey. So, KG, was that KG, was that a vote for abstention?
Sorry, no. Yeah, it was.
So it was a vote for abstention. So we've got 2 abstentions and 2 oppositions. Thank you. Cool. Right, so I believe that is a pass for the proposal. We were at currency, so we'll pass that. But I'll just pass over briefly to Tom before we move on to the discussion points, just for an update on the amendment from last week and approval from the Board of Trustees. So, Tom.
So just to provide a bit of clarity and transparency following the last UEC meeting that happened on the 29th of October and the policy or the bylaw amendment rather with regard to union policy that was approved by UEC members at that meeting. That is going to the Board of Trustees within Kent Union to approve, and unfortunately that hasn't been able to take place yet, so that's now going to the Board of Trustees meeting on the 3rd of December, which means that that bylaw amendment that was approved last time hasn't actually taken effect yet because it's been yet to be approved by the Board of Trustees. So both that amendment and this amendment, which has just been passed by UEC, will be sent to the Board of Trustees on the 3rd of December. So that's just to ensure that members are aware of the process, and also that is why the amendment from the last meeting hasn't yet been enacted, because the Board of Trustees need to jointly approve any bylaw amendments as outlined in the bylaws themselves. So yeah, so that's just a piece of information for members, just to be around transparency and clarity.
Brilliant, thanks, Tom. So we'll now move on to any updates from full-time officers. So is there any officer who wants to start us off at all? Come on, there's someone.
Oh, I don't mind going first.
Okay, I should go for it.
Second before Rachel, sorry. So maybe just a really quick update from me. I don't really have a lot. Just been working quite a lot on the online learning survey. We've literally just today sort of posted up all of the results, as well as sort of next steps from us. And work has already started with the university to set up webinars for lecturers to improve their sort of pedagogic practice, as well as working to try and implement strategies across the university to see where best practice is happening, mostly in the sciences, I must admit, and sort of spread that out across the university to make sure that all students are getting the best experience. The sort of 10 recommendations that we put up came from the sort of feedback that we've gotten through the form, and I think that it's pretty reflective of sort of what we've been told by reps, as well as from ad hoc feedback. So
we're really glad to have sort of gotten those 10 and be working on them. It's a really great way forward, and work has already started, so that's marvellous. As well as that, have started working on Christmas, or not Christmas arrangements, but for me, it's the end of term arrangements, looking at the sort of travel window, how students might be able to get home and when, as well as also starting to plan for when students are coming back, because obviously we're running out of time in this term, and next term is going to rapidly approach us. So having a look at exactly what that looks like, and a little bit of work on assessment practice too, and around extensions, deadlines, and whether a no detriment policy is possible or not. So all of that's been happening in the last sort of couple of weeks, which has been very fun, and starting to work on sort of further consultations next term about what students are expecting, I guess, going forward. So yeah, that's me.
Brilliant. Cheers, Vicky. Aisha.
Hello. So following on from our last meeting, there were a couple of things that we needed to work on. Some of those things included period poverty, gender neutral toilets, and accessibility on campus with regards to COVID safety measures. So a lot of those things revolved around estates who are currently doing a restructure. So those have kind of taken a bit of a back seat, and we'll be picking them up in the next couple of weeks. And another thing I've been doing is meeting with some of the networks, especially Accessibility Network, to work on Disability History Month, which starts tomorrow, and then trying to set up meetings with university staff for networks to get going on some of their projects. One thing I will say is that the transgender name changes on SCS we can't really publish it because I think people will, well, the university thinks that people will just want to change their names. So these are exceptional circumstances, but I'm fairly confident that in all of your networks and as, you know, community leaders, essentially, that these people will feel a lot more comfortable going to you. So I'm working on trying to awkwardly phrase it. But if you do get any students like that, then please do put that up. And then other things that I've been working on is continuing to work on mental health initiatives, so that they are not just for students in self-isolation anymore. It's pretty much everyone now that we're in lockdown and have been for the last week and a half. So we've put out a web page, a wellbeing web page with loads of resources on there. And me and Josh have also been working on a leaflet, which is out to go soon. And there is a survey where you can tell us what more you want from us, and what you like and don't like about the mental health and wellbeing support that we currently have, as well as some information on where you can go for example, have a chat with someone, or walking routes that you can do, things like that. One of the other things I've been working on is EDI at the university at divisional levels with Aldo, and I've been continuing to work with campus security on the issue of carding students. So that's been my main couple of weeks.
Brilliant. Thank you. Pat.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. Yeah, so it's been, like Aisha said, a busy few weeks. We've had a bit of a focus on wellbeing as well as sort of a postgrad team. So looking ahead to Christmas, we've been sort of planning events, things we can do for those who are staying on campus, and obviously thinking about returning in the new year as well for international students with Brexit kicking in. So I've been working a lot with the international department there, as well as the postgrad network and the international students network. So that's been fun. Starting to think about study spaces on campus, although perhaps that was something that needs to be sort of rethought in the new year with the university closing so soon. But there's definitely going to be sort of papers and information coming out on that. Like I just said, we've been put together a wellbeing walks document, so that should be on the Wellbeing Hub somewhere. I'll try and find another link for that as well. But that's basically sort of photo maps of the best sort of 5 walks I find, or I've found around Canterbury over the years that I've been here. Probably more than I should mention. Attended Senate. So as you'll see on today's agenda, part of the discussion is about academic freedom, which was brought up by Dr. Kelly Rudolph. She authored it with some of the other professors and doctors at university. But we'll sort of dive into that later. Kelly will be joining us as part of the meeting. So it's a really good opportunity to ask some questions of senior academic and their views on academic freedoms. So I really hope that you engage in that fully. And the last thing on a sort of more academic level, I've been sort of in talks with a graduate school at the moment regarding, thanks, Asia, regarding extensions for postgrads currently and looking at concessions with Vicky as well. So yeah, just a quick update from what I've been up to.
Cheers, Pat. Ramsey, did you have a question for Pat?
Yes, I want to ask him whether the paper has been passed by the Senate or is it still not passed?
So the paper was for discussion at Senate. It wasn't for approval. So I think it's just being brought to attention to Senate with the plan to be approved as another committee in the coming weeks, and then it will go up for return to Senate for approval and to University Council. You know as well as I do how university bureaucracy is. Yeah,
but I'm asking because I have some comments to make, and I want to know whether the paper has been passed or not.
Yeah, no, this is the opportunity to feed back into this paper and give some comments on that. So yeah, I'm sure you do have comments.
Brilliant. And Josh.
Okay. So I've mainly been planning stuff. So AGM, which is coming up soon, I've been putting together stuff for trustees so that students can understand who the student trustees are, who the external trustees are, and how the business of the union is run. Also with Movember, I've been putting on events and working with the Movember ambassadors to put on stuff throughout this month. We had a live chat today, which was very informative. I will be putting out quite a few of those bits of content out, hopefully throughout the rest of the month. Yeah, also just been, like Aisha, I've been talking to the networks to try and help them with their projects upcoming, and mainly just trying to find out more ways to actually empower this place that we're in now.
Brilliant, thanks, Josh. And Aldo, do you have anything to add if your internet's still not causing you trouble?
Well, let's see how it goes.
Sounds good at the moment.
After a great start already. I'll start with Kent Sport. So right now, currently they put a statement out about gym memberships because of this lockdown. It's very much a case of, because we don't know how long this is going to extend for the time being, they're going to hold off on memberships for now, because rather than creating a 1 month, they'd like to see where we're at in January. Not a big fan of this approach myself, but I do see their rationale behind it. I'm going to use this as a way to call for a more flexible gym membership alternative, because in situations like this, I think a monthly membership would probably be ideal for students. Following on from this, I'm currently writing a paper to the Student Experience Board. There's another E somewhere in that title, I've forgotten it for now, and as well as a letter to Rosie Duffield, a little bit later than I'd planned, but it's basically asking for a comprehensive plan from the government of what's happening with sports, and I'll follow on with this in a Bucks update, which I'll just jump into right now. So I'm going to be meeting with the sports officers throughout the country next month, asking for an idea, a plan, because as the union we pay quite a lot of money into Bucks, and if there's not going to be any fixtures for the foreseeable future, that money can be well invested, hopefully, into our clubs and societies for the next term. But I wouldn't like to get to that stage. So right now we're looking at what they can do to ask the government maybe for some support, as well as another comprehensive plan. So tied in with the letter, fingers crossed that should go all well and according to plan. Other than that, I've also been working on the big fair for next term in January. So we're going to try and do another virtual fair. We had planned for it to be in person, however, we all know what's happening at the moment. And so we're going to be using a lot of the parts that worked quite well from the last virtual fair, as well as tying it together, because we would like to have some sort of in-person, whether it's socially distanced or not, follow-up that will likely happen in February, whilst the big fair happens in January. And then following on from our last UEC meeting, I spoke to the development office about dongles for those with internet in town that is struggling, and to which they responded with dongles really do not help the situation. It's something that they've addressed in the past. So right now, we're looking to see if we can offer alternatives in other mediums and other areas. But that's all I've been working on. Sorry if I spoke quickly. Sorry if it's too brief, but that's all for now.
No, sounds spot on. Cool, thank you. Is there any other UEC members who want to give any updates from either their networks or any projects that they've been working on? Okay. Oh, I'm seeing a couple. Ria.
Hi, yeah, sure. So one of the ideas we had was basically becoming a net zero university. And this is something we saw that UCL was doing, and we thought that it would be like a good idea to sort of start working towards that. So if we look maybe in a 5 or 10 year span, and this is the sustainability network, by the way. So so we were just thinking of maybe making it net zero, but we were a bit unsure how we should go about it. And we did discuss it with Josh as well. So we thought maybe that's something we should bring up. And the other idea we had was to sort of increase biodiversity on campus. So just sort of make people more aware about the green spaces and increase the amount of biodiversity. So those two were the main things that we just thought of as a network. And then there was one that we were thinking of with the women's network. So Rian, if you want to add anything. But this was basically having more sort of sustainable products for like periods and sort of just that women require and increasing their availability. But that was something we were thinking of doing together, like both the networks. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you, Ria. Was there any quick follow-up anyone wanted to give on any of that? No. Abby.
I just wanted to quickly follow up on Ria's point. Been working with the Women's Network and also sustainability to maybe ensure that we can get sanitary products in the gender neutral toilets as well, that hopefully when that starts up again, we can sort that out and maybe get them more available around campus in general for people who do not feel comfortable going into, because at the moment they're only available in women's toilets, I think. So in the gender neutral ones would be ideally as well. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Abby. Just to double check, KG, do you still have your hand up from earlier, or is okay? It's down. That's fine. Cool. Was there any other point? Rian.
So I'm the chair of the Women's Network, and just to follow on from what the last two girls said, where all three networks have a very similar aim that we want to achieve, and we think by combining the efforts of three networks, we can hopefully come up with a really good project and a really strong project to present to the union soon. Obviously, the girls summarised it perfectly, and I think Aisha talked about it as well right at the beginning of the meeting. It really revolves around accessibility to the periods, but also at the same time trying to improve on the already existing systems within the university, because there are free products around, but they're just not that common, and also we believe they could be a bit more eco-friendly and like Abby said, a bit more accessible. So I think that's the main project that these three networks are trying to work on right now.
Thank you. Eleanor.
Hi, so I'm the person that's here representing the Accessibility Network tonight, and feeding back into what you guys have just said, we've actually been having a couple of conversations about the importance of having cross-network discussions about how we can intersectionally support each other. So this month is Disability History Month, and we were saying there's so many intersections with things that other people are working on that actually it'd be really useful, like setting up something like a WhatsApp or a group chat where we can all just have these discussions, because so many of the areas cross over. So I think definitely like working together to get stuff done is the way to go from that. So yes.
Fantastic. Thank you, Eleanor. Was there any follow-up on what Eleanor proposed? No. Okay. If not, is there any other updates from UC members? Just double checking hands. Nope. Oh, Mahisha Wana, sorry if I did pronounce that wrong.
That's fine. That's fine.
Go for it.
So about the Lebanese students I mentioned in the previous meeting who are facing issues about paying the tuition fees because the country has imposed some restrictions that they're not able to, they're not supposed to withdraw more than $10,000 per year. Patrick and I discussed it, and he took it to Anthony Mannings, one of the senior international officials, and he is sending out a letter of solidarity by tomorrow and a relaxed fee structure for the Lebanese students to work the situation out. That's my update. So cool.
Brilliant. Thank you. Was there any follow-up anyone wanted to give on that? Benjamin, go for it.
I think it's just something to add in as well, just in terms of being able to correspond between ourselves, but also with other sort of students from other universities even. So this is off the back of Patrick and I are working on something with discounts available to part-time students. And we're trying to look at whether it's something we'd look at locally or on a national level. But on the back of that, just to suggest something to other network chairs, I've noticed that there aren't any official Twitter accounts being used for the network chairs. We have Facebook groups, which are fantastic, but Twitter can also reach a far more public level and also get to other students, get to other organizations, get to other universities. So I have been started conversations with Riley about obtaining network Twitter accounts for those who are interested. And it looks like something that we can just set up on our own email accounts. But it might also be a good idea to have a standardized name format. So we're all singing from the same song sheet. Obviously, our Twitter accounts match our Facebook groups as well. But it might be an idea for those to think about if those who want to have a bit further reach, sort of beyond just Kent, if you've got any campaigns which require it, it might be a good idea to think about a Twitter as well. So just to put out there. And I think you're on mute, Connor.
Yeah, that was going to happen at some point. Thanks. Sebastian.
Hi, yeah, I just want to say about the Twitter account. Many networks do have a Twitter account already. We're just only beginning to be able to get access to them. I know that in some of the networks that I'm in, we really are, we've only, as of a day ago, one of the networks I'm in only just got access to even the Facebook. So I think the Twitter's is a great idea. However, if you just give the networks like maybe a few more weeks, I think since the elections were a little bit like into, October, whatever this year, I think some of us are still just beginning to kind of get our grounding. But I do think, yeah, the Twitters are a great idea, but I think most of them already exist already.
Okay, was there any follow-up you wanted to add on to that, Benjamin, or are you happy?
Just to say thank you, Sebastian. It's handy to know as well, but that sounds good. So thank you.
Awesome. So are there any other updates before we move on to the next item? No? Okie dokie. So next item is for just an opportunity for any general questions from anyone who might be observing, or even just any follow-up from other UEC members onto anything other UEC members have talked about. So if anyone has any questions, please raise your hands now. So I don't see any hands, so I'll assume we don't have any contributions for this section. So if that's the case, there'll be further opportunity later on for general discussions. Also, anyone can raise it during that. But if we've got no questions, I'll move on to the next item, which is discussion on academic freedom in higher education, and I will pass over to Pat to introduce that.
Thank you very much, Connor. I have a solid 5 minutes to kill here before Dr. Kelly joins this call. So I will share the chat, or the paper in the chat now. It looks like a dodgy link. I promise it's not. It's just one I made myself. I'm not going to put some hardware on your computers or some software on your computers. So if you want to follow that link, you'll see the paper there. Yeah, it is sus. I do apologise. The first half of the paper, for those, I think it's probably a good idea maybe just to go through it briefly as a group, so we have a kind of good understanding. This is going to sound like a seminar now, and I do apologise for that. So you see the first half of the paper is very much sort of sets the sets a scene in a sense. It sets a historical precedent and gives a bit of an insight into what already exists in terms of protecting academic freedoms. It's probably worth noting at this point that academic freedom acts a little differently to sort of freedom of speech laws, although it kind of does feed into a wider debate. So in a sense, it is very much in an academic sense. You know, it's not a case of you could have an external speaker who's a politician come in and say anything. That's not what this paper is kind of alluding to. It's more a case of that obviously within the law, academics should be able to pursue their areas of interest without persecution. That's kind of within their institutions. It's kind of the premise, if you like. So yeah, from page 9 onwards to the last sort of few pages of the paper are the basis of what will become, ideally, or in Kelly's opinion, I'm sure ideally, university policy on academic freedom. So if you want to pull that up and give it a quick look, just from page 9, 10 through to the bottom of page 12, you'll see some of the main points there. What the university would be committing to, what that would mean for staff and students, of course, and how I believe in the wider context which they're trying to establish here is how this feeds into the wider debate on academic freedoms within higher education. So my understanding is that this would be quite a sort of step ahead of what other universities are currently offering. Yeah, I know I'm going to throw Vicky under the bus here as well, because I know that she was at the Senate meeting on last week. So I don't know if she wants to say a few little points just to sort of keep this rolling. And as soon as Kelly gets here, I'm sure she'll be very happy to give a more broad and a more in-depth introduction to that than I have just been able to pull together. So Vicky, do you want to say a few words?
Yeah, can do. So I'm sure Kelly will give you the full rundown of this, but maybe just to say that this is a change to the ordinances of the university. So it's sort of like the premise for what everything sits on. And this sort of change has been trying to come about for a little over a year now, like before I was in office even. So it's taken a long time to get here, and I think that the sort of ordinance that they've put together is really clear. Obviously, if you've got questions, I'm sure Kelly will love to answer them. But also that it won't necessarily affect like day-to-day life, maybe to put it like that. It will sort of affect what can be taught and how it can be taught, and sort of what you can study if you're sort of going in to do a master's or a PhD potentially. But in terms of sort of everyday life, it's not going to change too much. But it is really important for sort of students to know this stuff and have sort of feedback on it. And it will be, like, as Pat said, this is sort of cutting edge for the sector. There isn't a single university out there that has a policy like this in place. And I think the sort of the time it's taken to get here and the amount of people that had input into this really shows like that this is sort of we would be creating waves, I think, in the higher education sector if we took something on like this. But yeah, that's all I have to add.
Thanks so much, Vicky. So I just noticed Kelly has join the meeting. So I'll just like to sort of welcome her. So welcome Kelly. We've just sort of opened the paper. I'll put it in the chat so people can read it. And I'm sure some people have given it some thought beforehand as well. But I'd very much like to sort of hand over to you to sort of introduce it and to sort of provide some context as well.
Okay, great. Super. Well, thanks all very much for having me here. I'll just introduce myself to start. My name is Dr. Kelly Rudolph, and I'm the head of the Department of Classical and Archaeological Studies, and I'm also a elected member of the Senate. And one of the things that we've been thinking about and working on as a Senate is academic freedom, because academic freedom is really a foundational piece of higher education and the university more broadly. And it is something that historically has arisen from a kind of approach to the academy and to education of the Guild of Workers, the Guild of Experts. And it's not something that is, so just it's not something that is arcane or anachronistic, but it is a simple and basic condition that we need to have in academia in order for your lecturers to teach and for you as students to learn. And so it is really, at its most fundamental essence, the key legitimating concept of the entire enterprise of higher education. And we could talk a little bit about the academic side of it, but I think it's important that I give space and time for us to talk about the student side of it. So I'm going to just set out a few of the basic principles, and then we can talk more broadly. So if we think about the background for academic freedom, often what's mentioned is the marketplace of ideas, and that's often attributed to Milton and Mill, although they don't actually say it. It's Wendell Holmes, one of the Supreme Court justices of one of the great Supreme Court justices of the 20th century in the United States, that said that. But Milton and Mill famously set out the value of a liberty to know, to utter, and to argue freely according to conscience, and the peculiar evil of silencing the expression of an opinion that robs the human race now and in future generations of the opportunity of exchanging error for truth in a completely free and open discussion of ideas. And one of the things that we've noticed, and I'm sure you've noticed too, is that we are living in an increasingly polarized society, in a world that is also increasingly polarized. And so we need to create a space, we need to keep a space completely free and open for the discussion of ideas, even those ideas that we are uncomfortable with or that we might find abhorrent. Because those echo chambers and those filter bubbles are becoming a norm, even in spaces where the free exchange of ideas we might expect to live and flourish, like online, for example, or in the media, or even over the dinner table at, I don't know, Christmas dinner with your aunt and uncle. That's always the place for me where freedom of speech breaks down. But our classrooms and our research spaces shouldn't be a place where that happens. This might be, right, our classrooms and our research spaces might be the place where completely free and open discussions of ideas sits in our society. And we think that the university should provide that space. And so we placed a few restrictions on ourselves as we wrote this draft ordinance that you've looked at. That'll be the point for discussion. And we've tried to be specific about how we are talking about it. So we're not here talking about we're not here talking about freedom of expression. We're not talking about academic autonomy. We're not talking about institutional autonomy or self-governance. We're talking about academic freedom in particular. And we want to put forward a policy that is as robust as possible. And what that means is that what we've written is actually the strongest statement of academic freedom in the country right now if we pass this. And that's really important because unlike most academic freedom policies that are very vague in terms of their language, or they define what academic freedom is in very loose terms, we are trying to provide something that gives a little bit clearer picture. And that's for staff and students alike. Most academic freedom policies don't include students, but we felt like it was an important component here. And we can talk about why that's the case later if you're interested. And so this policy would really put us ahead of every other institution in the UK, including Cambridge and Oxford, in protecting staff and students' right to that free and open space for debate. And this is a concern that we have partly because there are factors at work. I think I said in the Senate meeting last week that there are the whispering winds of authoritarianism that we can hear in our society. So I gave two examples. One was in 2017 when the MP Heaton Harris asked all universities to provide him with access to teaching materials and lecture videos related to European affairs. And just 2 weeks ago now, MP Badenoch, who is currently the Women's and Equalities Minister, claimed on the floor of Parliament that critical race theory and teaching about systemic racism was unlawful in the UK's schools. And that is a concern for us as academics, because we need to create a space for voices to be heard and for debate to take place. And we've seen similar movements in the United States, in Europe, in South America, and in Asia. So this is really an important time in the history of this country, but also in the history of this world, to reaffirm our commitment to academic freedom and to be really clear about what that is. So that's just a little bit of background to academic freedom as a whole. And I just want to say another word about academic freedom for you as students, because I think this is the piece that often gets missed out. Because this is so the idea of academic freedom was really put forward in Germany by von Humboldt, after whom the Humboldt University is named. And he said that students had the right to learn, and that university professors had the right to teach and the right to research. And so that right to learn is an important element of the proposal as we set it out. So one of the things that we have focused on here is that student freedom is part of the larger concept of academic freedom, and there's a kind of meshing of a freedom to learn with a freedom to teach. And those are seen as inseparable facets of academic freedom for us. And one of the things that we really see as the primary driver of this is that your lecturers need to be able to create an environment in your classrooms that are free for discussion and for inquiry and for the expression of ideas. And there also needs to be some protection to make sure that you are evaluated solely on an academic basis without any kinds of opinions or biases coming into that outside of the purely academic framework of the work that you do. So the policy as we've presented it, as we've written it, protects freedom of expression for students, where it says students should be free to take reasoned exception to the data or views on offer and to reserve judgment about matters of opinion. And there's also protection against improper academic evaluation, right? That you should be evaluated appropriately. Alongside that, of course, comes with any freedom comes the responsibility to maintain the standards of your academic performance and to learn in accordance with the content and the procedures set out in your classes. So that's the sort of basic background, and that's what we're trying to do in the proposal. So I will now hush and let you ask questions or raise points for discussion. I'm looking forward to talking with you all about it.
Thank you so much, Kelly. That's a much better sort of summary of the paper than I'm sure me and Vicky could offer. But yeah, so questions on this. I think we can. Well, if anyone has any questions, I'd like to raise a hand. You can raise your hands now. I'd say that questions can range either from sort of specifically in the paper. So if there's any kind of points you want to bring up, it's there in front of you. So if you have specific things you have questions about, you can use that there, or you can of course use this as an opportunity to feed into the wider debate surrounding academic freedoms. I'm sure some of you might have seen the post website this afternoon asking, are modern students snowflakes, or is academic freedom in universities alive and well? So there's definitely areas of consideration. So Ramsey, your hand was up first.
Yes, thank you. Dr. Kelly, this is amazing for someone who believes that development is freedom. I think This is probably one of the happiest news I've read or seen in 2020. I just have a couple of comments or questions. There seems to be a group of students that are not included in this paper or suggestion. So the paper clearly states the rights of staff and clearly states the rights of students, but there's those who are in the middle, researchers, who are technically students but practically staff or somewhere in the middle, who conduct research and actually help their disciplines grow. Considering the fact that you insisted, or actually you stressed the fact, the importance of explicitly stating that freedom of academic freedom is something important, I think this is something that should be considered, especially that early career researchers tend to not have enough network or support. Some of them are self-funded. Some of them do not have what it takes to actually be properly supported. And some of them, I mean, personally, I'm from the Middle East. I'm studying collective violence in the UK. You can imagine the amount of pressure I might be exposed to if my research breaks through or does some interesting findings. So do you think that this is something that should be reconsidered in the paper to include?
Well, so I think it depends. So are you talking about GTA students? Are you talking about people who are here on postdocs? Who exactly are you talking about?
I'm referring to anyone who is doing research as part of this institution.
Right. So in that case, you're covered as a member of staff. So if you look at 37.1, it says all members of staff who engage in academic teaching or research, either by their written contracts or by established and agreed practice, shall have these freedoms. So we're including under that subpoint 37.1, we're including all research staff, including ECRs, including postdocs, anyone who is doing teaching or research. That also covers people who aren't in academic schools necessarily. So for example, we have a lot of staff who are teaching on our international foundation year, and they actually sit under our internationalization office, not in a department. And so they would be covered by this too, because their contracts and their practice is one of teaching. And similarly with researchers, early career researchers are covered underneath this because their contracts and their practice is research-based.
Yes, but I'm referring to researchers who are students. So technically, they're students within their schools. So
PhD students.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, so PhD students are absolutely covered because they are registered students of the university.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that the section about the students does not really cover the work that is done by PhD students. PhD students do research, and they're not really learning anything. They're actually contributing to the disciplines.
Well, they are contributing, but they are also still students, right? So they're still registered as students, and so they're still the standards and norms and processes of their academic discipline. And so in that respect, they are still counted as students. It doesn't mean that you wouldn't have the same protections, but it's something we can look at, and I'll see what we can do about strengthening the research student component of that. But for all intents and purposes, we've written the policy to cover both of those pieces. So maybe I'll take that back. I'll take that back to the committee and see if we feel like we need to maybe add in some language here that specifies better what's happening under which category we're counting our PhD students. Thanks for that. Yeah, really helpful.
Thank you, Ramsey. Rachel, did you want to come in? Rachel, you may be muted.
I'm a little bit of a special panda sometimes. Thank you. I'm a postgraduate student in SAC in the Humanitarian and Environmental Crises program, and I'm wondering how, if this paper is applied to the university, how this can affect both positively and negatively the way that students, especially postgraduate students and researchers, are able to apply for and receive funding. Many times in funding applications, I'm sure you're aware, for archaeology and anthropology together, you have to, generally speaking, and we'll talk about this later, I know, in our meeting, provide some sort of traditional presentation of data and findings at the end of your research. But we're finding more and more that that kind of final product is not applicable to our fields and to society as a whole and societies in general. So I'm wondering, especially in, I think I cited the 37.1.3.1 kind of talks about the ways in which having alternative findings should be accepted through academic freedom practices. And I'm wondering if this will be facilitated through funding disbursement across campus. If not, I don't know.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So I think so this came up more or less in similar problem in different terms was raised in the Senate meeting. So I think one of the things is that this policy can only pertain to the institution. So we are limited in terms of what we can mandate by our institutional boundaries. So I can't talk about UK RI or any of the national or international funding bodies that we apply to. They set their own standards. But certainly for university funding, I think the idea here is that yes, absolutely, right? That the merits of the research have to stand on their own, quite apart from the conclusions that we may find uncomfortable in what they're presenting. And so I think that that's absolutely what we're trying to set out, not only in 37.131, but also in 37.4.1. where we talk about the support, how the university needs to support academic staff to pursue their research regardless of its focus, and that should be free from any bias or institutional agenda. So I think what we're attempting to do here is to state clearly that the university will support the pursuit of that research, even if the conclusions that it's coming to are unpopular. Does that help?
Yes, sorry, my internet has been crapping out, but yes, that was significantly helpful.
Oh, good, thanks.
Great, thank you, Rachel. Vicky.
Yeah, I guess I've sort of got a question for the students here. Under 37.4.2, I believe it is, or under that sort of 37.4 section, obviously it picks up on the fact that even if a topic is deemed offensive, unwise, immoral, or wrong-headed, it can still be brought forward as part of academic debate. So I guess my sort of thought is to the students who might be from a marginalised background who would be part of those conversations, and how they those situations where something's brought forward maybe in a seminar that could be uncomfortable, or you don't agree with completely, or sort of goes against who you are as a person, how that might work in sort of practical terms, and how you as students would feel about having someone who puts forward an opinion or a debate that goes completely against who you are in those sorts of circumstances.
Thank you very much, Vicky. Yeah, I think it opens sort of the wider connotations of this discussion, which I think we can bring some responses in. Sylvia, did you want to start that?
Hi, I just want to ask Dr. Rudolph if she thinks academic freedom means that teachers or lecturers do not necessarily need to decolonize their curriculums, as I understand that complete control from the lecturer over what they're teaching means that they can control the content of the module. and I want to know how we can perhaps overcome this issue.
Right, so I think that's a really good question. So I don't think this in any way detracts from the work that's being done on decolonizing the curriculum. But I think that, because I think that one of the things that university lecturers, I think that one of the things that university to do is they have to create an environment in which difficult conversations on difficult topics can be had. And it's something that we're all really alive to. It's an issue we're all really aware of. And so it's something that we're working on. And I think that I don't think that they are in conflict, basically, is what I'm trying to say. I don't think that decolonizing the curriculum is in conflict with academic freedom. I think that those two things can sit side by side because so I'm in a field, right? I teach ancient philosophy in the classical and archaeological studies department, and that is not necessarily a field that you would think would be easy to decolonize, right? But in fact, it's not as hard as you think. So for example, when I teach Plato's Apology, we also read Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham jail, and we look at Plato within the context of civil disobedience and what's happening with this larger discussion. And so I think that that's an example of where I still maintain academic freedom to teach, but I do it within a context that is aware of the context within which I live and within which my students live. So I don't see those two things in conflict, but I think it's a great question. Thanks.
Thank you, Kelly, for your response there. Sylvia, was there anything else quickly you wanted to add, or shall we move on to another question?
I do just want to say, like, Dr. Kelly, I know that, for example, in ancient philosophy, you are very much diverse in your teaching. But when it comes to lecturers who may not have the same appeal to diversity as you do, how would this academic freedom and the mandatory requirement that as part of the BAME network, we would like to propose that a certain amount of the curriculum does include BAME authors or writers, how do you think that would impact those who do not necessarily want to involve those kind of, BAME people in their modules? That's really what I'm trying to get out, not specifically you. So yeah.
Sure, yeah, I hear you. So I think that you have to, it's a balancing act, right? And I think that the best thing to do is to have conversations about this with those professors who might be resistant to the idea of decolonizing the curriculum. And but I think that the fundamental thing is that rights do sometimes come into conflict with one another, and there are lots of legal decisions, there are court cases on exactly this kind of thing, not so much related to decolonizing the curriculum, but related to teachings about religion, for example, in the classroom. And in general, the law sides on the side of the lecturer to teach in their classroom on the basis of the established norms of their discipline. And those disciplinary standards and norms tend to predominate in the law when it's brought to court. And so that's a kind of fact of the matter about where things sit currently in the larger system. But I think that that while that's the case, again, I don't think that decolonizing the curriculum has to come into conflict with academic freedom. I think it's about starting a conversation.
Thank you so much, Shelley. Kelly, sorry. It's 7 o'clock and I'm still in the office. Emily, you're making a few points in the chat. I wondered if you want to sort of elaborate on some of those, especially your second one about how should be debated how all of this can be ensured to stay in the classroom. I think it's a really good point. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. We were just talking about it over here, actually. So like basically, I find like the whole like paper of like Kelly really, really important, and like I'm super like interested and motivated by it. But the point Vicky raised is kind of like a really frightening point as well, because like trying to like imagine what it's like to be discriminated in a safe space, which is also like as a classroom is also a safe space for people who would be like attacked by certain discussions. So I just wanted to like hear a bit more like thoughts from you guys on like from like you, Vicky, on, and maybe from like Kelly also, like if you could like let us know like how these excesses can be controlled so that like the class still is safe for everyone, if that makes sense.
Yeah, great, Emily. Thank you very much for this. So this is something we were really concerned about as we were looking at how this policy would come into fruition. And this was a conversation that we had many times in our subgroup as we were putting this together. And it was out of that discussion that point 37, where is it now? 37.3, where is it? There it is, 37.3 was written. So what we wrote here was that all members of the university must maintain a climate of mutual respect and observe policies concerning behavior at work and the conduct of duties, including expectations of tolerance for those with differing opinions and identities. And we put this in specifically because this is a real problem, and we recognize that this is a problem, that we are attempting on a university campus to create a safe space for people to test out ideas, to share ideas, and to work with them, right? Within a context where they are invited to be critical, and where they are invited to test in an open way. But I think that nonetheless, even though that's what we're trying to create, we have to continue to uphold the standards of respect and civility and tolerance of differences. And so I think that that's where we left it, was with that piece, right, about tolerance and respect, because it is really important. And I think that one of the things is that one of the difficulties here is that there are always going to be difficult cases. There's always going to be the test case where the policy is put to the test. So as we wrote this, we wrote it knowing full well that there would be situations that would arise on campus that would put this to the test, and that we would want to potentially come back and make some changes on the basis of sort of the sort of spirit of intellectual engagement that we have on campus. But that's where we try to address that, is to make sure that the context, that the environment remains one that is respectful and civil.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Emily, was there anything?
Was that, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know if I'm allowed to like follow up or not on the...
Yeah, please feel free. I would just like to sort of just point at the chat as well, though. I see
okay, sorry.
Sheikh Ali is also mentioning probably something which you're going to maybe touch on as well. So I don't know if Emily, you want to sort of make your sort of point, and then
yeah, I think it kind of joins in, because it's just like the problem with these very ideas is that they're intolerable. So like, how can we, like, it's the whole debate is all about that, I guess. But I think what's her name, Sheikh should probably like talk about this at this point.
Yeah, so. Do you want to come in there?
Hi, my name is Yasmin. I would just like to go back to the answer that you gave Sylvia about how you expect lecturers to hold a certain degree of respect and tolerance with these diverse identities. However, I feel like leaving this space for lecturers to do this allows a certain grey area that can result in just not what we want. I worked with the student success team last year, specifically the School of Physical Science, and one of the major issues, roadblocks that I felt existed was that what we were proposing, I did all the work to audit their reading lists and such, and give them all the information as to the importance of decolonizing curriculum and why they should, including alternative reading lists and alternative resources to give to students. But ultimately, the issue was that the curriculum is something that isn't mandatory. It's only optional for these lecturers and these module conveners to take this information in and then decide whether or not they would like to, represent their students, and whether or not they would like to make their reading list more inclusive and representational to their students and what they are teaching. And I fear that this paper, this proposal, whilst it is important for autonomy with lecturers to and module conveners to be able to one instead of bureaucratic things coming in between that, I think it's important for something here to state that it is important. It is crucial for BAME, for queer communities and other communities that are not necessarily represented in our current academia, Western academia as such, that giving lecturers the option to do this and giving lecturers all control to do this. And I'm afraid that what it would do is create an even bigger attainment gap within the university.
Right. So I don't know exactly how to respond except to say that this is a concern, and I am myself completely on board with what you're trying to do, and I understand entirely why you're wanting to do it. But the thing I think that needs to be made clear is that Josephine, stop this. I think the thing that needs to be made clear is that this policy is about establishing the boundaries of academic freedom, and that is those are boundaries that have not been set out clearly in the institutional policy, but that nonetheless university lecturers have. You're never going to be able to mandate this kind of thing from a legal perspective. You're never going to be able to mandate diversity because it infringes on the notion of freedom. And freedom and constraint are always going to be in conflict, even when we have the best interests of our students and Josephine, stop it. The best interests of our students and our classrooms and our learning at heart. There's that conflict, that tension is always going to be there. And I think that the best way to address that isn't to mandate, but is to sit down and actually have a conversation with lecturers and with students and show the value that it has. You don't change hearts and minds by mandate. You change hearts and minds by conversation. And that's certainly what we've seen in my department and in my school, it's the conversations that we have with lecturers who are resistant over weeks and months that begins to change their mind rather than mandating what needs to happen. And it's a slow process, but you have a lot of allies on your side among the staff and among administrators. So it's not by any means it doesn't have to be an uphill battle, but it does have to be a conversation, I think. Josephine, I need you to go and have your dinner, okay?
I think having this conversation shouldn't be after this mandate that you're proposing. It should happen alongside it, and I don't think that is what is happening right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you, Yasmin. I think that's an excellent point, and perhaps it's something that sort of me and Kelly could take away and look at other ways in which we can engage with students on this and perhaps have follow-up debates. I'm just conscious of time a little bit. Sebastian, did you have another point that you wanted to bring up, or was?
Yeah, just quickly, I wanted to say, first of all, I'm in support a lot of academic freedom. I believe very passionately, obviously, in keeping the rights of academic freedom. I think it's very important. However, I did want to kind of build off of what others have said, that I do think that there's a difference between academic freedom and freedom by academia to allow discrimination in classrooms. And I really think that by kind of passing such a general, wide sweeping, piece of mandate or whatever, I think it would be a mistake to not also include very firm rules around diversity, not even just mandating it, because I hear what you're saying about, you know, having conversations, really trying to change people's hearts and minds. But I also mean, you know, I'm from the US, where, you know, you give an example as having a lot of academic freedom. And, you know, I've been in classrooms before where teachers have decided, well, wouldn't it be fun to have a debate on whether, you know, the rights of gay people should be protected or not? Like, should they be allowed to have rights, or should they be allowed to be discriminated against, you know? And I get having debates and trying to change minds, but I also think that I don't think the rights of human beings should be a debate. I don't think, you know, it's the kind of thing that we're going to get anywhere having a debate, because I think you'll always have the naysayers saying, well, I actually don't believe in their rights. You know, I don't think you're going to change minds through a classroom setting necessarily like that. And it made me a little uncomfortable too to hear, well, maybe we should, you know, put this to the test. There'll be bumps along the way. And I don't think we should allow for that bumpy road of, well, maybe we'll have a part where, you know, minorities don't feel protected in classrooms, and we'll have to come back and change that, you know, in a few months or years. I think that it should be written into the policy where you won't have that bumpy road. I mean, I've spoken, you know, as one of the 2 members of the LGBT network, I've spoken to transgender students who say that their lecturers refuse to use their names in class. So I think if lecturers right now are refusing to use something as simple as a name that's preferred, I think you're going to have an even harder time when it comes to, you know, more quote unquote controversial topics. So yeah, in summary, I do really love the idea of having something passed for academic freedom. I think it's really important. I think it's great work that you're doing, but I think that there really needs to be more written into it that really protects the rights of minority students and marginalized students, because I don't think allowing for this kind of debate necessarily is always a good thing.
Great. So thanks very much for that. So I think one of the things that's important to remember is that this is an academic freedom policy. And what you are talking about is a diversity policy. And those two things are very different. And so we have to, you know, one policy can only do so much. And I think that we have to keep that in mind. And I think that what I perhaps didn't make clear, but perhaps should now, is that the bumpy road is already here, right? We already have the bumpy road, and so this policy isn't about getting rid of the bumps necessarily, but about providing a framework in which, when we hit the bump, we can assess it and make sure that that bump doesn't come back again, right? And this policy will sit alongside all of the other policies in the institution: the diversity policy, the freedom of speech policy, the religious and belief and opinion policy, right? All of those policies sit alongside one another in order to provide the framework within which we learn, and within which we teach, and within which we research. And so I think that it's important to see that those policies all sit alongside one another as we travel the bumpy road together. And this policy in particular is about freedom, because that was our remit. But it's not about diversity, but it acknowledges the importance of diversity, and that diversity and issues of tolerance and respect are going to come up. And we're trying to provide a space for that in what we've written here. So if you have any suggestions about the brass tacks, about the wording of this document that you think would improve it, please send me an email. I'm more than happy to see it. But we're really at that stage now where we're trying to get down to the details of what the policy should look like, and what the words should be. And I mean, I'll just say a word about that too. So in 37.3, we talk about mutual respect, and we also talk about tolerance. And we use both words intentionally, because we think that there does need to be mutual respect, because we are all human beings, and we need to treat each other as human beings and as equals in this in this marketplace of ideas. But we talk also here about tolerance, because if we think of an example, right? So if we have someone come onto campus who is a neo-Nazi and is allowed to speak, I find those ideas absolutely abhorrent, and I cannot respect that view, but I can tolerate it. And I think requiring respect for a view is very different from requiring tolerance for a view. And nonetheless, even in that tolerating of a neo-Nazi point of view, I would nonetheless be bound by the boundaries of mutual respect. So I wouldn't call names, right? I wouldn't attack someone physically. There are all sorts of things that I wouldn't do within the realm of civility and mutual respect. So that's why we chose those words in that section of the document.
So if I could just do a really brief response.
Yeah,
I know we're running low on time, so I'll try to keep it brief. But I do want to say, I hear what you're saying. I do, but I don't feel like there should be respect for neo-Nazis, for example. Not that I advocate calling them names or, getting physically violent, obviously. But for example,
this policy doesn't respect their identity as a neo-Nazi, or respects them as a human being, right? Mutual respect for them as a human being. But it does mean we have to tolerate their abhorrent view.
Right. What I mean is I don't necessarily think that, and the example that you gave, like having a neo-Nazi as a speaker, for example, I don't think that's something that necessarily needs to be tolerated in an academic setting. I don't think that the university should be obliged to give them a position to speak for others to hear it. I think, as just an example, obviously, I don't think that, assuming we pass this, we're going to get a wave of neo-Nazis begging to come to our university. But, as an example, say we did, and say, okay, the university says, well, we've got this academic freedom thing passed. I don't think it's necessarily a good thing that they would be allowed to come to the university and speak. I think neo-Nazis can incite a lot of violence and hatred and are not necessarily a good thing to tolerate the opinions of. Yes, respect them as a person, tolerate them as a person, but respecting or tolerating their ideas, respecting or tolerating their freedom to speak in a university setting, I don't think, I personally wouldn't support that. I wouldn't support allowing them to have a platform. And so I think maybe it's just a difference of opinion there in general, but I do think that I would not personally agree with any sort of academic freedom policy that allows, for example, a neo-Nazi to be given a platform.
Right. So I understand that. I understand why you might say that, but I think nonetheless that the space needs to be protected for that completely free and open exchange of ideas. And then once the space is created, we have a choice as individuals how we use that space, right? So this is absolutely abhorrent. I refuse to show up. And what better way of providing a picture for a speaker of how intolerant and abhorrent their views are than for them to show up and sit in a room empty for 2 hours with no one to talk to, right? So that's one way in which we can respond to abhorrent views, is we can just not show up. The other way is that we show up and we engage with them. And we say, your ideas are abhorrent for all of these reasons, right? And provide rational, clear argumentation against that viewpoint. And I think that is also a really important way of responding to ideas that we find objectionable, is to actually object to them. And the thing is that in our society, we don't have many places where that exchange of ideas can happen. And that's why what we're saying here is that the university needs to be that space in society where you can have a real conflict of ideas. And that's for our generation, but also for future generations, right? That dialogue needs to take place.
Thank you very much, Kelly, for that response. I think that's a really interesting point about universities being that place where those debates can take place. I'm aware we still have a few hands raised. One of the other agenda items for tonight was actually on Decolonize the Curriculum. So I'm not sure if we want to sort of continue that debate into this debate, as we've kind of touched on it already, or if Charlene, if you want to sort of come in a little bit, maybe to introduce that topic and re-steer that debate in that direction. But just from a sort of chair perspective, and from someone who's, I would argue that our combined as well, Rachel, I agree. Sort of brought it to the students. I'd just like to say thank you to all of you for your active engagement in this. It's really actually sort of blown me away a little bit. I'm a bit overwhelmed. And I would urge you to carry these conversations on after tonight and with your peers and in your lecture theatres or your virtual lecture theatres, shall I say? Because as we've said throughout this chat and throughout this conversation, that this conversation doesn't end here. There is opportunity for this to continue.
So can I just say something on that, actually? So absolutely talk to your lecturers. There's nothing a lecturer wants to do more than to talk about academic freedom. I can guarantee you that. And so show up at their office hours and talk to them about these ideas. As I said, send me an email if you have some suggestions for how you would like the wording to look. And one of the things that we're hoping to do is invite a lecturer from the University of Lincoln, Terence Karen, who is an expert on academic freedom to campus, to continue just the kind of conversation that we've had today. So if you're interested in that, watch this space. I'll be in touch with Pat and the other members of Senate to let them know about the details for that when we have some clear picture of what university life will look like in the new year.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kelly. I'm sure that thanks extends from everyone as well. I don't want to sort of call the debate short, and I see there's still a few hands up. And if you have those opinions or you want to sort of raise points, etc., if you feel free to stick in the chat, or as Kelly said, if you send her an email, I'm sure the debates can continue there, and we will look to get something sort of set up, shall we say, to allow us to continue. But for now, if it's okay to hand over to Charlene for the sort of conversation on Decolonize the Curriculum. So yeah, thank you, Kelly. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you so much for coming.
And feed my kids because they are crying. See you later. Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Lovely. Yeah, if you want to come in and sort of get that debate started. I mean, we've touched on probably a lot of the things so far. I'm sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to sort of do like an opening piece, and I'll hand the chair duties over to you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so I guess the discussion we're proposing is on the topic of expanding and decolonizing the curriculum. It's being made on the grounds that expansion towards a decolonized learning experience should be mandatory rather than optional for lecturers. As we would have also touched on this in the previous discussion, it's made that the construction of like module content within the university, has been formulated upon a very Eurocentric premise and often serves to be negligent of wider perspectives and optics outside of a European point of view. We've seen that figures illustrate that BAME academics and professors are like chronically absent from higher education in the UK. This lack of representation contributes directly to the issue of module curriculums lacking representation and inclusion of BAME academic work. So while it has been acknowledged that the absence of BAME scholars from higher education is a matter of structural inclusion, it's one that will need to be addressed wholly outside the domain of the union. But what is within the union's reach is the ability to implement a mandatory alteration of this module content, ensuring that there's at least a broader demographic reflected in order to improve the learning outcomes for BAME students. So whilst the student success team is doing this work, the main distinction is to have a diverse curriculum as a mandatory component and not optional. By mandating this expansion, it should facilitate numerous things, such as the creation of a curriculum inclusive of BAME studies that is reflective of students' varying backgrounds, the creation of a curriculum that receives greater reception from and is thus conducive to learning for BAME students, which can then have more results contributing to the improvement of BAME student attainment success, the creation of a learning environment that is progressive and reflective of a globalized world, and then most importantly, improvements in the university's overall ratings by students and improving ranking prospects. So yeah, we I would hand this over to my other network members. Yeah, if you want to jump in. KG or Yasmin, yeah.
Yeah, so we just feel that it's important to kind of change the policy from being voluntary to mandatory, just so that it's kind of equal across the board, and it kind of hopefully will lead to lecturers understanding what their role is in like decolonization, and giving them a sense of agency with the problem, understanding that like what they teach has a direct effect on the outcomes that their students face. So yeah, this is something that we definitely want to talk about and get your guys' feedback on it.
And again, just to reiterate how one of the main issues we have is proposing to schools, etc., which already exists as part of, again, the student success team. For example, 100% of the physics module is written by white male European authors, whereas their students do not reflect this in terms of race and gender, and proposing that a diverse curriculum is optional rather than mandatory. What it does, it only just increases the attainment gap, which is already an issue within the university for students and the students that we are representing.
Yeah, so I guess if anyone has any comments or further questions about this discussion, please. Yeah.
Aisha, go for it.
Hi, so I just wanted to talk about this as just to give it a bit more weight. I mean, we always talk about representation, and I feel like it's something that certain people, certain groups of people just don't truly understand. I think it's one of those things where like you don't know until you experience it, but until you are a student in class unable to engage with the work that's put in front of you, and that has an effect on your grades, on your interest in the module, on your coursework and things like that. This is a really serious thing that I think all people kind of need to put themselves in the shoes of these students. I mean, if we think about it, we can look at some of the statistics in the country, but only about 61% of students here at the University of Kent is white, and 40% of students in Medway are BAME students and students of colour. So this is quite a large population that we're just missing out on, and just we're not hitting with the work that we are allowing them to engage with. So I would encourage people to really think about what impact this has on certain students, and try to imagine what it would be like if you, for reasons that aren't even your fault, are unable to engage with your course material. I just think that's something people need to be mindful of when having this discussion.
Thank you, Aisha. Charlene, did you want to say anything in response to that? Awesome. Cool. Are there any other contributions for this discussion at all?
I'd be happy to contribute for a moment, although I realized I just unmuted myself and I didn't raise my hand. I'm sorry.
That's absolutely fine. Go for it.
As an anthropologist, my position with decolonizing work mainly has to do with gatekeeping and ageism. So I completely agree with a lot of the points that you've raised about the importance of more inclusive works being studied at all academic levels. So my conversing about this matter isn't meant to be exclusionary of that. But if anyone is looking to have discussions regarding more inclusive work of younger academic aged or younger academic students participating in different kinds of research and not being included in research areas or conferences, I'd be happy to help advocate for that as well, because I think that the inclusion of younger and lower academic level students within research of all fields is really important and often overlooked in terms of attempting to decolonize academia.
I think that that's a really good point, and also goes in line with increasing accessibility of like academic resources as well. So I think that we will definitely be getting in contact with you to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free. Most people at SAC are very familiar with me and my positions on this. So anytime.
So I think I was on mute, but just wanted to add something else. So I apologise, it's not so much of a BAME content, but I do feel a slight concern over how Kent may be falling behind slightly in terms of module content that features sort of LGBT issues or career areas, or especially in my own school is School of Arts. So two particular areas of interest to me are the inclusion of sort of queer history, queer art history, queer film in the module content, and also other things. I mean, my other sort of interest area is GRT, which is Gypsy Romani Traveller backgrounds. So both people of that background coming to university and being able to get to that kind of level in education, but also a representation of other sort of diverse backgrounds as well. So I kind of feel, from what I've seen so far, certainly in School of Arts, I can't speak for the whole university, but you sometimes have a module that dedicates 1 week to certain subjects or content areas. I really kind of feel this really needs encouragement for further inclusion, not necessarily whole modules. I'm not sure we can get to a point at Kent yet where a whole 30 credit module could be dedicated to those areas. But I'd be interested to find out what the other schools are doing, how the levels compare. So like I say, certainly School of Arts, it's sometimes an odd module has one odd week that cover subjects such as that. So yeah, I wonder if we are falling behind a little at Kent.
Okay, thank you, Benjamin. Is there anyone who wants to provide any follow-up on that before I go to Eleanor? No, Eleanor, go for it.
So my point was actually following up on Ben's. I agree that 100% we need to decolonize the curriculum. I have had, I think, one non-white dude as a thing in my reading list so far in this entire term. And I mean, that's not uncommon. I'm in theatre-based stuff. Most of the people that are kind of commonly studied in UK theatre courses are European and dead and male. So less dead French philosophers, please. Yeah, so in terms of like inclusion, it is so rare to see any academic writing from anyone with disabilities or neurodiversity or any mental kind of established long-term mental health issues actually being used for anything outside of a literal accessibility or disability discussion. And they are out there. There are plenty of disabled academics. They're just not commonly chosen. And I think if we're kind of talking about, oh, we're moving towards a more inclusive world and all that kind of stuff, it needs to be all protected characteristics are being covered by reading lists, not just, you know, one or two. And I think, again, it becomes back to this thing of like working across networks, working across communities and making sure that actually we're all going, okay, this is the reading list, that's great, but where's the diversity? Like, we need to actually be actively having those discussions. So 100% support this piece, totally. There is also this wider discussion to have about all identities and all characteristics being represented throughout the reading list, because really, what's the point of having a reading list that literally doesn't represent the students that are reading it? Like, to me, that's kind of pointless. So yeah.
Thank you, Eleanor. And maybe just to build upon what Eleanor's just been talking about, is there any points anyone might have about what we as a university can be doing to sort of as next steps for tackling some of these issues we've just been talking about? Has anyone got any suggestions? Rachel.
Yeah, so I know of, I don't remember the acronym off the top of my head, but I do know that there are a couple of organizations across campus that work to include different modes of research presentations as a across the divide, a kind of holistic sense of applying research and final products. But I think increasing the interaction between departments and schools on campus, as well as research, would allow us to better work together, not only as academics and researchers and students that engage with materials, but also as people hoping to create a more holistic and a more decolonized academia and higher educational system that will do students after us more of a service than has been done to those who come from non-white, non-traditional education backgrounds and who come to higher education for something but find it inaccessible.
Okay, thank you. Vicky, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, maybe just to say that I'd love to help and get involved in terms of making this a sort of cross-divisional thing. There's a lot of new and different powers in play at the university at the minute, so I'd really love to sort of bash some heads together, as it were, to get this through to people. But also that I know that Decolonize UKC obviously was working on this as sort of they released their manifesto, I believe, early this year. And unfortunately, I think quite a lot of that group or the staff that were working with it no longer work at the university, which is really a shame. So I guess it's just maybe thinking about different ways or avenues that this can sort of get put forward and pushed onto a university-wide thing. Obviously, I know that a lot of networks will be working on this together. I'm so happy to sort of bring everyone together to have a chat about that later on, to sort of see how we can make some waves. But also, I think I'd just like to raise that so many academics always give the excuse that, but all there is like white males who write on this. But like, I'm from an ancient history background, and I spent an entire term looking at the representation of like sort of Black Britain and how that's portrayed in current media, because it's not. But those sorts of conversations can take place. Like, the academics writing about it might not be Black, they are white. Most ancient historians are, but there are spaces and conversations to be made and had. So I'd really like to work with you guys to sort of see how we can implement this university-wide and sort of get to the heart of these matters and make people actually listen.
Brilliant, thank you, Vicky. And obviously, I'd encourage anyone to please reach out to the officers to kind of take any of these points further that we've been discussing today. Sheikh Ali, do you want to bring in something?
Yes, my name is Yasmin.
Sorry, Yasmin.
So just to go back to what Charlene introduced, I propose that next steps is that I would say is that as much as what we're talking about is that more conversations need to be had, etc. These conversations have been had. These conversations, again, the work that I did with the student success team as a diversity mark intern, where I provided them all the information that gave them everything they needed to work on. The issue was still to the fact that, again, it was an option for them to take in this information and do what they will with it. Instead, I think we need to move away from this cycle of just having conversations and rather implement something that is more structural in these changes.
Thank you, Yasmin. Before we move on to the next item, is there any final points anyone wants to make regarding next steps? No. Okay.
Sorry, can I just ask, based on what Yasmin has said, what are you guys doing in relation to that to make sure we're not just being vocal about issues to be vocal about them, but actually having something done?
Thank you, Sylvia. Do any of the officers want to follow up on that?
Was that necessarily a question for the officers, or was that a question for those that raised the discussion point, just for clarity?
That was genuinely a question for the union itself, like not as officers, but as Kent Union, Kent Parliament. What is going to happen? Because you can raise these questions, but what are you going to actively do to change it?
So I think Tom might want to come in for a point of information. Tom?
Yeah, so something that could definitely be looked at, and this obviously kind of follows kind of offer from Vicky to kind of follow up on this outside of the meeting, would be to look at how, as Yasmin kind of mentions in terms of the structural changes, things that we've done in the past with students and supporting students to make change, and what the officers obviously do on a regular basis, is looking at how we can be submitting papers, student-led papers to senior university boards, to both be raising topics and discussion points, but also to be putting forward policies and recommendations ourselves, either to amend existing policies or even to create new ones. And over the years, with creating structured policy with the university. So I'd suggest that's a particular avenue that would be useful to pick up with officers and relevant networks outside of this meeting, to kind of actually draw out some next steps about how do we progress putting a paper together that would go to a board meeting. The kind of next round of board meetings, for reference, is kind of early Feb and then early April, for the next 2 rounds of kind of senior boards where this kind of stuff would go to. So that's something that we could look at and pick up on. But I'd suggest maybe looking at networks, liaising with your officer support and your staff support, and we can then maybe pull that all together and kind of look at actually collating a written paper with some firm proposals and recommendations into structurally change the university.
Great, thank you, Tom. Yasmin, did you want to add anything?
I think that's a brilliant point in a student-led paper submitted to the board, which I think is something that we should work on.
Thank you. And Emily?
Yeah, this is just a short point on what I put in the chat already, that we could all kind of lobby for this as reps in our different schools. And I think like Vicky or Lauren could just coordinate that and ask us to do it. And sometimes it's more effective. Like, for example, like last year, I was pushing forward a bill for the academic advisors, and it didn't get that far university-wise, but the School of Politics at my school, I was also pushing it there, and they've implemented what I asked for. So sometimes it works more to go directly through the schools.
Thank you. And obviously that can be used as an alternate avenue. Pat?
Yeah, I just want to say with that, actually, with the new divisional structures, there is a lot of scope for change. There are people coming to new positions. There are staff still even yet to be appointed, which gives us a good opportunity, with the whole restructure going on, to actually target this either across divisions. And yeah, I completely agree with Tom's point. A student-led and student-authored paper with sort of the help of the officer team, I think could go a long way to make changes in this university. So that's all from me.
Thanks, Pat. Yasmin, is that an old hand? Do you have another point you want to add?
No, that's all for now. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. And please do continue these discussions outside of this meeting as well. Because obviously, I guess these meetings are the starting point. And obviously, anything we can draw out from this to work on would be fantastic. So we will now just move to finishing this off the meeting, because I realise we are getting quite close to 8. So we'll combine the final 2 sections. So generally, any final pieces of business anyone wants to raise And this can obviously link into what we were going to be discussing about student engagement more generally. So any other business from anyone? Rachel.
Thanks. I am wondering if there is a mode of help or a department of help that students can go to when they're emailing administrative departments and receiving no response. I've been hearing from a lot of postgraduate SAC students from a chunk of international students that are having issues with international loan disbursements. We've been told to email an individual who has not gotten back to any of us for about a month now. So I'm just wondering if anybody had any advice as to someone else we can email.
Vicky.
Yeah, just to say that that individual may not be in their role anymore. Obviously, as most of you are probably aware, a lot of university staff are not in the roles that they used to be in. So it might be best to reach out to, if you've got like a student support or student administration office, to them, because they'll probably be able to best signpost. If not, our advice centre can probably help. They tend to have a more up-to-date list of contacts and can help with like financial stuff.
Sure.
But yeah, that's probably it.
Yeah, we were sent by someone else in the foreign loans department to the specific person, but I'll go ahead and email my school student support email, and I'll request that other students do the same. Thank you.
Can I just quickly say, if you still have issues and you're not getting answers, feel free to reach out to me or anyone in the international network. I might be able to point you in the right direction. I receive foreign loans, so I could probably give you some help there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sebastian. We will just continue for a while just afterwards. So if there's obviously anyone who needs to go, please feel free to, but we will be carrying on just for a little bit. Aisha.
I just wanted to quickly say that in formal general inquiries with student administration, I know they've been very slow for certain cases. So please do get in touch with me, because I'm bringing that to their higher ups. So I just would love to collate information on them not getting back to you, basically.
Thank you. Eleanor.
So this was going back to a little bit of what we were talking earlier about cross networks and cross group conversations. I have messaged the other members of the network about being in the Teams chat, and it's being raised, and it's actually something worth being aware of generally with everyone's sending out things and making sure. Basically, Teams is not terribly screen reader friendly, which is why there was WhatsApp being discussed, is because WhatsApp does work well with a screen reader. So anyone that's partially sighted, for example, our network chair really struggles with Teams because of it being a bit manic at times, trying to find the right message. But kind of generally in terms of if people are sending out paperwork or promoting things, if they can just make sure that the formats are accessible as possible. If you need help with that, please come to the network. We are 100% trying to make sure that everything that's going out through, we're kind of pushing for wider accessibility for things generally. So if you're not 100% sure, please message us. But like having things like if you've got an image, having a description of what the image depicts and making sure that things are formatted in a way that is easily accessible. So like the paper earlier for the academic freedom is really not accessible for neurodiverse or specific learning differences just because of the wording and things. So just being aware that, like, although we may all be doing academic courses, not all of us read things in the same way. That kind of stuff, you know, it's something that so far from what I've seen has been fairly good from Kent Union themselves, but just like be aware that there may be people in your network who aren't saying anything but have accessibility needs themselves too.
Thank you, Eleanor. Did any of the officers just want to follow up on that Kent Union perspective? If not, it's fine. Aisha.
I'm really sorry. Yeah, I think when it comes to, for example, the name change to Kent Parliament, this is largely what we want to do, is to make it a lot more accessible, and just have basically simpler language, making sure we're being as clear as we can be and trying not to use like ridiculous jargon, because even I don't understand it. So I think it would definitely bring more people to the conversation and increase engagement. But that is a general thing that needs to be worked on, both at the university and at the union. So thank you for bringing that up, Nelly.
Thank you, Aisha. Is there any other business anyone wants to raise at all? Emily.
Hi, actually, Romy. I wanted to ask you if you can do anything regarding transport, because basically the cycling hub. So there's a service where you can rent a bike for the term, where like the students can rent a bike for the term. At the moment, it's suspended because of the lockdown, and basically that means that everyone that rented the bike and is commuting to university with the bike that they rented have no access to maintenance. So if their bike break or anything, they cannot get adjusted. And I've talked with the person that is in charge of like the cycle hub, like Chris, and he is negotiating with transport at Kent to like trying to open during the lockdown. And I was wondering like if Kent Union could like participate in giving a push for that to happen.
Was there Aisha?
Yeah, we certainly can. We are currently having conversations with them, just basically over the fact that they shouldn't be suspended. I think the reason they gave is that we shouldn't be exchanging objects because of coronavirus. But yeah, that's pretty much no excuse for maintenance not being upheld. So we have started these conversations, and hopefully we can raise your point as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. And was there, I'm just thinking from the earlier point from the officers, was there anything any of you wanted to add it on the wider Kent Union engagement point we were going to be discussing at all? Was there anything you wanted to ask in particular?
I think this is over to Josh.
Yep, Josh.
Hello? Can you see me on it? Okay. So the question was about what you think the union does well at when they engage with students, and also what they do not do so well. So putting out basically for feedback from you all to see what can improve and what's already quite good. Which is obviously a discussion. Yeah.
Emily. Cool. Thank you, Josh. Does anyone want to raise points on that topic? Pat.
Thanks, Connor. Thank you, Nelly. That's very kind of you to comment. Yeah, I think kind of the question Josh trying to ask, and I'm aware it's late, so I don't expect this to go on for the rest of the evening, or maybe in quite a depth that the other debates this evening have. But it's sort of, has anyone got any sort of thoughts on how they found sort of Kent Union's post in terms of their accessibility, in terms of do you find them engaging? What more do you have suggestions for us basically on how we can improve our engagement with students? You know, for example, stuff like tonight. You know, do you feel like it's been well marketed, that people have heard about it? How can we do more to reach out into communities, and how do you feel we can help, or how do you feel that you can help us in terms of reaching out to students? You know, you're obviously network chairs, you have your own networks, you have a lot of your student reps, I know, and you have your network through that as well, and your schools, of course, your lectures and seminars. So I guess the debate is sort of around in what ways can we work together to promote stuff like this? You know, like tonight's debate on academic freedom is obviously one which we'll be following up. If we hold another event in, say, 2-3 weeks, which is more focused on academic freedoms, we want that to be well attended. We want that to reach a wide part of the student body. And yeah, that's kind of the question there. So I don't know if back over to Connor, but just to sort of get that ball rolling.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Pat. Nelly.
So we were literally having this discussion with Aisha during our Disability History Month planning session. And we were saying the thing that gets people most engaged when they is when they have something to argue about. So I think definitely things like academic freedom is going to be one that you will get a lot of engagement with if you put it as, this is a debate, come and have your say, come and argue the hell out of it. People like arguing with each other. It's funny, but like at my old university, we had a restructure and lost all of our course leaders. And we basically said to people, come and have a debate with us and come and sign this petition that's going to say, we don't need this brand new building that you're building elsewhere, bring us back our course leaders. And we got the biggest turnout I have ever seen on that campus, because people are like, okay, there's this debate, I can come and have my say, there's high up people that are actually going to listen who can make a difference, and I can physically do something to improve my own experience. So I think things like that, but that like where it's actively engaging people and there's an outcome that they can see from it, rather than it just being like, oh, we're going to have a talk about this, but like nothing might happen. If it's like, we're going to have a petition or a statement or a letter for you to sign digitally there on the day, come along and do it. That's 100% how you get people to turn up. People like arguing toss with each other.
Thank you, Pat.
Yeah, I think that's a really fantastic point, and I think that's something we've tried to sort of structure tonight around a little bit. So at the start, so some of our updates were about things that you had raised last time here at UEC, and you know we took away and we gave you an update today on them. So like you said, it's in case people don't want to come and waste their time. You know, they want to think that the things that they're bringing up are being listened to and are being taken forward and are actually being actioned. So I hope that we've demonstrated, just at least to this group this evening, that when you do bring things to us, we do listen and we do take them forwards as a union and as an officer team. So I guess what we need to work on is sharing that with the wider student body and saying that this is a place you can come to raise your concerns, and they will be listened to in that sense.
Thank you, Pat. Emily, I saw your hand was raised earlier. Did you want to add anything?
Sure. So the main point, I guess, but you're already working on it, is like all of this is brilliant, but like students need to know like what it is, like because UECs, I think I've never been to UEC before today, because like UEC doesn't really like, I know you want to change it with the like parliamentary thing and everything, but for now it just doesn't sound like anything. So I guess you're already working on it. And the other thing we wanted to talk about is also the rep changes. The fact that like reps are no longer elected kind of takes away our legitimacy and our sense of like responsibility for everything. So yeah, those 2 points.
Thank you, Emily. And Aldo, did you want to follow up on what Emily was saying?
No, mine's very much more general, so if someone wants to jump in, they can.
No worries. Was there any of the officers who wanted to jump in on any of Emily's points?
I can make a few comments regarding reps. I've got Tom in my ear, so I'm sure he's got some thoughts as well. But yeah, the process of restructuring reps is the first time we've sort of done it in this way with regard to revisions, and I'm sure that looking forward there will be opportunity for feedback. I mean, obviously this is one of them. I know, Emily, we've spoken before about it briefly, perhaps. So yeah, we will look at how we can implement things for the next round of reps recruitment next year. We do hear your feedback. Obviously, this this year is sort of a pilot scheme, if you like, of the new structures, and how we can fit it best with the divisional structures. So yeah, thanks.
Cheers, Pat. Emily, did you have any follow-up? Yeah,
Yeah,
of course,
no,
go for
I
it.
just want to add in something. It's like, because there are no elections anymore, it is harder for reps to communicate and like to with the students, to let them know that those are their student reps. Well, before, when there was an election, it was easier because they had to vote for them, you know. So, but so like it's just contradicting like the reaching out and trying to, you know, reach more people to be active in communion, and then in the system it kind of takes that out. But I still see where you came from with the thing, because I think there are way more student reps than there used to be before, so that's still like a good thing. But then we have to be given another kind of platform, maybe to make clear, so that the students are clear that who they can reach to now that they don't elect us, basically. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm just going to bring in Tom, so he's got his hand up.
I just thought I'd provide some context for some of the changes that happened with regards to the reps, just from a kind of union point of view and kind of a operational point of view about some of the changes we've made. Some of the things that we've implemented as part of the kind of rep changes are based on, obviously, as kind of Pat alluded to, trying to align or use it as the opportunity to align with the new divisional structures. And because of those changes that we was making, we thought we'd try something new in terms of our engagement. So for context, as you kind of alluded to, previously last year we had about 280 reps in Canterbury, and that tipped over when you included Medway to just over 300 reps in total. This year alone, we've got just over 500 reps. We've massively improved it, and that was one of our motivations with regards to kind of looking at the recruitment model. And it's actually a model that we're following from other unions, such as Sheffield, that does extremely well in terms of its engagement and student voice structures. The reasons as well we kind of got rid of elections was, one, for a lot of students, it was actually deemed a barrier to engagement. Because of the very nature of elections, when it's a low turnout election, it's very much based on kind of popularity or just getting a couple of friends to vote for you. So for certain students of certain demographics of students who are marginalised groups, and again, this comes from NUS kind of data over the last decade or so, is that actually students who don't see themselves in the wider population of their course generally won't stand for election all the time, because they don't feel that they're going to get voted in, because they don't feel that students like them who would vote for them. So one of the reasons we're looking at changing the recruitment system is the barrier to certain demographics of students. Another thing is that, and I always use the same example, which is just disengaging students. So last academic year, we had an election in biosciences for a stage 1 undergraduate biosciences rep. We had 9 students run for that position and 38 students vote, which in our minds was fantastic engagement. That's the epitome of what we wanted to. But in hindsight, we've just turned around and this was a first year election. So in the first 2 weeks of someone joining university, we've had 9 people want to engage and become a rep and actually contribute to their academic school and make a difference to students. And we've turned around to 8 of them and said, well, sorry, we don't need you. We don't actually want your views. We can't use it in that particular way. Not to say people can't get involved in other ways throughout the year. So that's another mechanism of where we measuring engagement right in terms of recruitment. And in terms of the legitimacy argument, the names that we give to the schools are still listed by the schools as academic reps. You're still therefore invited the opportunity to attend university meetings. You're still on our list of reps in terms of our legitimate kind of database. And actually, in terms of the vote and the legitimacy of the vote that you kind of mentioned, on average, our rep turnout, and in terms of elections and voting for reps in previous years, probably is in the low single figures. If anything, in most elections, we have previously one person vote for the rep, which is usually the person running for the rep position. So actually, there was a question of what are we weighing up, the legitimacy of having a vote on it when only 1 or 2 people are voting versus removing barriers to be able to engage more people initially in the vote, not the vote, in the actual roles and the positions, etc. themselves. So these are all things we've weighed up. As Pat suggested, actually, this is something that we obviously want to be getting feedback on throughout the year. issues like you feel like with regards to the legitimacy and your ability to engage with your students is definitely something that we want to look into and pick up. And obviously that can be something that can be picked up with Lauren, our rep coordinator, about how if we don't have or we continue with no elections, how can we ensure and enforce that legitimacy for your roles and empower you to actually engage with your student body going forward. So this is just something that we're trialing, and we definitely would like further feedback on this, and we will begin it throughout the year. But those are just some of the kind of the rationales and reasonings that we kind of have been looking at to kind of implement this new structure. So I just wanted to kind of give context there for your benefit.
Brilliant, thank you, Tom. Emily, did you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, just to give kind of like on the ground like feedback from that, because we're both reps for our school, and although we're about like 20 reps now for politics, which is like a lot, because we've got no sense of responsibility anymore, because we're not like, well, we don't feel like we're legitimate anymore. Now that kind of showed with the last meeting. We were like 3 reps, so sure, there are like a lot of more people that are being engaged, but no one shows up anymore. Like, it's even worse than last year, and it was pretty bad last year as well. Like, so it's just like, yeah, a bit of feedback.
Thank you, Emily. Nelly.
I was just going to say it's something that is different to my previous uni, and it may be the case that this is standard for Kent, or it may be because I'm a postgrad or I'm new to Kent or whatever. I actually, until Ben just sent it, had no clue where to find out who my reps were. That was never sent out to me. That was never made particularly clear. At my old uni, like, admittedly we had course reps, so it was maybe a little bit easier to find them. But like, I would have had literally no clue where to go to find that information out. So I don't know if it's something that ought to be sent out at the beginning of the year and say, hey guys, if you have any issues like that needs addressing, these are your reps or something. But like, that's just a personal difference, and I came from a very small university, so I know it's going to be different because Kent is so big. But like, just making sure that students actually know their reps are there and that they can be used and that they're making the most of them. Yeah, just making sure that's communicated well, I guess.
Thank you, Nelly. Vicky, were you wanting to follow up on that?
Yeah, so maybe that's just a point for us that we can be doing more as Kent Union to sort of include that, like find your rep page better in our comms, but also, and I'm not making excuses for the schools, because it's been really difficult not having the staff members in the schools who normally deal with this stuff. I know a lot of schools normally have like web pages and ways to contact reps, specific email boxes, things like that, and they've just not been set up this year. Obviously, with all the changes we've made, it's been quite difficult to sort of get schools on board, and now they are on board. We need the staff members in position to sort of help us with the admin stuff. So at the minute, it's all very Kent Union focused and not very school focused. A lot of you haven't even heard from your schools yet, if you are reps. So yeah, we're just sort of trying to get through those difficulties at the minute. A lot of those staff have literally been put in place this week, so we're just sort of playing catch up a bit. But hopefully in the coming weeks, we'll sort of have a better structure and better guidance going out to them, so that all students can know who their reps are at all times. But thank you all for your feedback. It's actually been really useful. And if you've got any further feedback, please feel free to email me at like any time. This is like really crucial stuff, and obviously it's not stuff that I'd necessarily heard before. So if you guys have got feedback about reps, about who they are, where to find them and stuff like that, please email me. I'll put my email in the chat so that you can forward anything on.
Thank you, Vicky, for doing that. Nelly, did you want to follow up on that, or was it an old hand?
Just to quickly say, like, we've had fully in-person teaching. We're really lucky that we're one of the few exceptions because of being very practically based. And I maybe would have expected our tutor to maybe just even mention that they existed. And that wasn't done. So I think definitely putting some pressure now on schools to like be getting that information out there. Actually, there are people you can talk to who have a bit more of a wide reach. Is definitely going to be worthwhile, because it's an important thing in terms of if people can't go directly to tutors for whatever reason. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Nelly. Sebastian.
Yeah, I just wanted to actually be a little bit of a contrarian and say I actually really enjoy the multiple student reps experience. And I found that not being the only student rep has made me feel less intimidated to bring issues to my school, because I'll have other people backing me up a little bit on them, especially since I mean, it's my first year being a rep. It's my second year at Kemp, my first year being a rep, and my experience so far has been that my school seems a little hesitant to want the opinions of students. So sometimes it's like you're kind of insisting to please listen to students, that we don't hate them, we just have feedback for them. And it's been really great to have, I'm one of 3 reps for my year, and it's been great to have other people there to say, hey, I agree, here's what I've also seen. And also that my school has sent out an email to the students saying, these are your reps. But I think what I'm seeing, so I switched schools. So last year I was in a completely different school than I am this year. And I think a lot of the confusion is coming from first years, or it could just be the school that I'm in, but the first years this year seem to be a lot more confused about the rep system than they did last year in my other school. And I think it's just that the way things are being conveyed online makes it really easy to miss things. So maybe if, more information can be sent out to students about the actual function of student reps, because we did get an email, these are your reps, and a very vague, you can talk to them, but maybe more info about the actual role of them, what sort of things they might want to raise. I don't know if this is something that's possible maybe to be sent out to all students, but it would definitely, in my opinion, be helpful.
Vicky, I can see you nodding your head. Is that something that the officers can follow up on?
Yes, definitely food for thought. I'll work on it with Lauren to see sort of what comms we can put out around reps, who they are, how to contact them, and what their role is. Yeah, thank you all for the feedback.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Aldo, I know you had your hand up for a while. Did you want to briefly come in on those?
I feel like it's kind of sailed away with all the rep talk, but I guess one of the things I wanted to talk about for future UVC and just the clarity of it and the convenience of it. And given the fact that we've lost half the people here, I think we need to work on the time of when we situate them. So I think quite obviously we're going to go over the ball on a lot of things. And once we approach the early hours of the night, we may need to think about maybe bringing them forward or perhaps doing something similar to sport where we have evening afternoons off. So maybe we have to do something similar for UEC. But yeah, we are kind of in an information bombardment at the moment in terms of engagement and why it's low. The people spend all day in front of a screen because of Teams and engaging in various other forms of online. I think people kind of want to switch off. So we need to have a comprehensive think about how we use social media or how we push out things wherever we're using individual platforms. And it's just some food for thought. But unfortunately, the audience I wanted to say this to has gone off to do essays or eat or sleep. But yeah, that's it. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, and hopefully, actually, a lot of those points you mentioned we can pick up on next time, definitely. Cool. Thank you all so much, and also thank you for staying on into the wee hours as we order onto it. We're doing some great discussions tonight, so thank you all very much for contributing. So I will draw the meeting to end there, but thank you all so much. Have an amazing evening, and we'll see you in December for the next one. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you very much, Connor.
Bye.
Night.
Yeah.